Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today. So the topic of today's webinar is one which is very close to my heart, as I'm a mother. I have two young children, and I'm also a financial advisor. So it's really important for me that I teach my children the value of money and to ensure that they grow up being financially aware. I read Will Rainey's book, Grandpa's Fortune Fables, which is a series of stories that are told in a fun and engaging way, essentially there to teach children about money. I wanted to do the webinar today, really to spread the word and to try to help other parents begin to engage with their children on this topic. Before I introduce Will, I'd like to start by just giving a very brief introduction to myself and to Skybound for those that are not already familiar with the company. So I began my career a number of years ago back in London, and then was fortunate to have some time spent working in Buenos Aires and various places across Europe before moving to the Geneva area coming up to 10 years ago. I have two roles within the organization. So I am a chartered financial planner. I have my own clients that I service and look after. But in addition to this, I am Skybound's pensions manager. So with this, I provide my technical support to my colleagues and their clients in relation to pension matters. As a company, we began as GWM, so a UK-based financial planning company around about 25 years ago. And then back in 2020, we were acquired by Skybound Capital Group. So following the acquisition, we rebranded to Skybound Wealth Management and have since been going through a period of expansion and growth. Essentially, yes, strengthening our existing client proposition. We are a completely independent company, so we're not tied to any one product, we're not tied to any one provider. We have complete freedom and flexibility to look across the whole marketplace. In terms of what we do as an organization, essentially we're financial planners, so it's our job to understand what our clients have, what their needs and goals may be, whether that's saving to buy their dream house or planning for their children's education or their retirement. Once we understand their objectives, we're then able to identify any shortfalls that may exist and then can work with our clients to put a plan in place to help them to get from A to B. We are very much a global organization, and we have offices situated in a number of different jurisdictions across the world. And we are fully regulated in the jurisdictions in which we operate. So most recently, we obtained a CISIC license last year. So following Brexit, it has meant that we're able to now continue our operations across Europe. And last year, we were again delighted to receive a number of awards from the International Advisor Best Practice Awards, which very much demonstrates our commitment to being the world's most respectable financial planning company. In terms of the agenda of what Will and I will be covering today, we'll be looking at the importance of teaching children as young as 4 years old about money. Will be explaining the 3 rules of wealth that all kids should learn to follow, and how to teach children the different uses of money in an engaging way. He'll be talking about how pocket money can be a really effective tool for teaching children about money, and then looking at how to teach children about the stock market and investment risk. So without further ado, I'm now delighted to introduce Will Rainey. Hi, Will. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Nice to be here.
How's life in sunny Thailand?
Oh, it's really good. It's starting to just come into rainy season at the moment, but I definitely can't complain. It's nice and warm. So I'm sitting with shorts under the table.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining today. As I mentioned, I think this is a really important subject that we're going to be discussing. So Could you please start by just giving a little bit of background on yourself, and just explain what inspired you to write the book and to do the work that you do?
Sure, no problem. So my background is I started in the UK working as an actuary. So for those who don't know what an actuary is, essentially an accountant who loves statistics. And so I used to help big institutions such as retirement schemes, insurance companies, governments, endowments, look at how much investment risk they were taking and then consider where they should put those investments. So I was doing that in the UK, and then in 2014 moved from the UK to Hong Kong, where I kind of took up the role of head of investment strategy for a large consultancy firm, which meant I got to, again, travel around Asia, talking to some of the largest institutions in the world, some cases sort of advising on sort of multi-billion amounts of investments. But then it was around 2017, I was talking to one of my clients about, and we're just having a general chit chat, and I was talking about my 2 young daughters. And at the end of the conversation, they just said to me, "Oh, enjoy this time with them. They only grow up once." And whilst it's an obvious statement, it had quite a big impact on me. I was one of those working in the financial services industry, kind of quite busy. And so I was like, right, I want to spend more time with my kids as they were growing up. So I told my wife that we should do this plan. And then in 2019, we both left our corporate jobs and moved from Hong Kong to a place called Hoi An in Vietnam, which is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And so just to do our own thing and spend more time with our kids. But I really wanted to have a project whilst I was in Vietnam with my kids. My kids were in international school. And what really struck me was I kind of wanted to use my kind of financial knowledge. But what struck me is when I left Hong Kong, a lot of people said to me, how can we afford to be able to take time off corporate work? And it kind of surprised me a little bit because the industry pays quite well and we know about money and we sort of advise our clients. But I found myself as being one of the few that actually was taking the advice that we were giving to our clients and actually using it on ourselves. So my wife and I have kind of been savers and investors for the longest time. So we had this kind of a nest egg that we'd had, and that meant we could take time off and have that financial security. And so I felt really, really fortunate to be in the position that we were in to take that time off and have that time with our daughters. And I really wanted to make sure that my kids, when they grow up, had that same, at least opportunity. They might not choose to do it, but so I really wanted to teach my kids about money and make sure that they start getting into that habit. And that's how I kind of got into it. So in 2019, I started my own business, which is called bluetreesavings.com, to really help share the stories that I was using to teach my kids about money, because I wanted to do it in a slightly different way. I didn't want to sort of lecture my kids about money because they would just get a bit bored, but also how I learned about money. So I learned a bit through my career, but I also learned through some really good books. So there's the likes of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. There's the likes of The Richest Man in Babylon. And more recently, there's The Psychology of Money. And these books are really powerful because they use stories to show and teach people about money. And I really love them. So I was like, right, I want to teach my kids about money. I want to use stories. So I came up with lots of little stories when I was putting them to bed. Some were good, some not so good. And my kids were very, very good at telling me which they enjoyed and didn't. And so it was nice. I got this little project and I got to work with my daughters. And then I started to share those, and the feedback was really, really positive because there was a lot of parents that saying, I want to teach my kids about money, but they were never taught themselves. So I was kind of giving them this tool to be able to do that. And then after a while sharing these stories in blogs initially, that they came back and the positive feedback was I should create a book. And then, so about a year and a half ago now, I released my book, Grandpa's Fortune Fables, which allows me to share many of the stories that are in many of the most popular financial or personal finance books for adults, but tailored towards children and using sort of fun analogies, etc. And it's just gone from strength to strength. And it's going to be in Chinese. It's already in Vietnamese and Romanian. So I'm very happy about the response. But what I love most is that parents saying they're reading it with their kids, and that it's helped the parents as well. As I mentioned, most parents have never been taught before, and so they've gone away.
For sure. Well, I think it's extremely valuable work that you're doing, and it's an interesting story as to how you've got there. What I find interesting in my line of work is from time to time I come across people that maybe they've got thriving careers, but they don't have the tools or the knowledge to actually manage their money. So perhaps they've got high levels of debt, maybe they don't save, maybe they don't invest. So I find a big part of my role is simply to educate people, to help them to understand what they have and what they actually need to have in place in order to be able to reach their goals. I mean, one of the sad and most frustrating things I find, particularly if I meet someone saying they're in their 50s and they've never thought about financial planning, is the fact that it's obviously much harder for them to get on the right track again, compared to someone who's actually been thinking and starting these things 20, 30 years earlier. This is not something, sadly, which is taught in schools. So it means that the onus is very much on us as parents to ensure that our children are well equipped.
No, and it's, as you mentioned, it's that starting early has a huge advantage, but also it's that children learn so much. So you mentioned it's not taught in schools, which is a real shame, because children learn most of their money adult behaviors by the sort of age of 7. So trying to teach your kids about money from the youngest age. So you can imagine a child when they're young, and the only contact that they have with money is via spending. So they go to the shops and they see money getting spent, or if they get some money for their birthday or Christmas or whatever special event, the adults will generally say to them, "Oh, what are you going to go and spend that money on?" And it's not until later in life that someone might say to them, "Oh, you should think about saving." But by that time, their sort of brains are like programmed to money is for spending, and then we have to try and decode that sort of hardwiring in the brain that's kind of made that strong connection. And as we know that with adults, it's so hard to change behaviors and habits. So therefore, if we can teach kids
so early,
so getting in there early.
Found it was news to me how early things do start and how important it is to make sure that children from such a young age just start to get into the right habits early on, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now in your book you talk about the 3 rules of wealth. So if you could please just outline what these are. I'm just going to share my screen with you so you can see.
Sure. Yeah, so the 3 rules of wealth, as I mentioned, there's many good books out there for adults that set out different skills or knowledge about money. And so what I want to do is just try and distill it down into as few amount of rules as possible to make it easy. But the key thing about, before I go into the detail of the rules, is they're very much about actions. And it's when it comes to money, it's not so much about having children who know every single money topic and they can talk about tax and debt and all this. So whilst I've written about all those topics, essentially it comes down to habits and behaviors. And I do believe that as I go through these 3 rules, that if children can learn to follow these 3 rules from a youngest age, they will grow up financially healthy and wealthy. So the first one is simply spend less than you earn. Now, that sounds very simple and obvious, but say in the UK, for example, over 50% of adults today are in debt, excluding their mortgage. So that means 50% of people in UK adults are not following that first rule of wealth. And whilst it sounds simple, it's incredibly hard to follow. And one of the main reasons for that is that you've got essentially companies spending millions, collectively billions, on marketing, and the marketing teams know exactly how our brains work, what makes us spend our money. They know about scarcity, authority, social pressure, and clearly with social media now it's even bigger. So you can understand. So you've got all that money being spent on making us spend, but there's very little on teaching us not to spend. And so that's why I think financial education is so important. But I'll go through how we can teach kids this, but these are the principles. So that's the first one. The second one is, once you've saved a little bit, is to understand how that money can grow. And so that's trying to get into the mindset of not just having money and just keeping it under the bed, but putting it in a way that allows it to grow such that over time it can get larger and larger and larger. And if you invest it in the right way, it can compound. So a small amount today, after a period of time, can grow into a large amount. So that's the second one. And the third one, which I think is hugely underrated and not talked about as much, is to be patient. When it comes to money, patience is a superpower in my mind. Those who are patient are going to be more likely to save. They're going to be better investors. They're less likely to get scammed, less likely to use debt, less likely to gamble. So they're going to be able to hold on to their money, but also make their money grow. And it's a skill. Some people are naturally patient, some aren't, but patience is a skill that you can learn. And I really encourage that everyone listen to this. If you've got children, we need to try and help our kids become more and more patient. And later on, we can talk a bit more about how we can do that. So they're the 3 rules that I hope that kids will, well, parents listening to this or guardians listening to this will help their kids start to follow. But they're not easy to follow. So we can talk a bit more about how we can follow those.
It seems straightforward, doesn't it? But the stats that you mentioned there just show that how many people are actually not following it, which is, alarming, really. But in the book, you use a really fantastic analogy, which I loved, about seeds as a way of just helping children to understand money. Can you please just explain why you chose to use this analogy?
Yeah, no, exactly. So when I first started talking to my children about money, my youngest was about 4 years old. My oldest was about 6 years old. And so clearly talking about money and talking about the words like investing and save and spend and patience is a bit boring and not very engaging. So I use this analogy, which I've heard before, but I've used it a lot more than probably anyone else, is to get children to think of money like seeds. And they can simply give those seeds away, and that's just like spending. But it was really interesting as soon as I started using that analogy, both my daughters at that young age were like, what does it mean when you save? What does it mean when you plant those seeds? Because they clearly get what a seed is. And that's when we started talking about saving. And so I said, well, for any seeds that you don't spend, you can keep, and then you can plant them. And over time, those seeds will grow into trees. And the great thing about that is over time, those trees will produce more seeds, which you can then take and plant into more trees. So soon enough, my daughters were sort of visualizing this kind of forest growing, and it's like their money forest growing.
Great,
and hence the name
for them, yeah.
And that's the name. My company is called Blue Tree Savings, because we kind of talk about saving and having these blue trees, which is our kind of money trees, that we were drawing them out. We even had little bits of cards that we used to show them.
That's great, very interactive.
And it made it much more interesting. And over time, so they started to ask a little bit more probing questions. They're like, oh, what does it mean? How does the seeds grow? And then we started talking about investing, and we talked. What really worked out really well is my kids are learning about the environment at school. And so when I talk to them and say, right, you're going to have this blue tree forest when you're 18, are you just going to chop it all down? And you can see the sort of panic on their face. They're like, no. So they kind of want to look after these trees, which is their money. And that's exactly what I want. I don't mind them chopping off a few branches, but I want them to look after their money and their trees. So it was really nice. It kind of worked out in that way for that analogy.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And you've translated it onto these rules, haven't you? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So growing this kind of forest. So again, not using the adult language, but saying right to my children, keep 1 out of every 10 seeds that you keep. So every time they get a pound. Then the key piece is to plant the seeds. So they don't want to just keep the seeds under the beds, because those seeds would just essentially go a bit rotten. But essentially they want to plant them. So that's investing. And then lastly is be patient. Children, even from the youngest age, know that if you plant a seed, you don't get a tree growing the next day. It takes time. And so just having this visualization gets them to see money into the future and gets them to think about, right, what do I need in order to grow this forest? And I say both my daughters now want to grow a forest, and they're a little bit competitive with each other to see who's got the biggest forest, which I don't encourage, but it's nice to see.
No, that's brilliant. That's really good. So, I mean, what actions can we as parents take then to encourage our children? Yeah.
So the first one is it's all about habits, and starting from a youngest age. So I'll just, before I go into this, I'll just share a story from one of the stories from the book. which I think really helps, especially for that first one
Mm.
around save more than you spend.
Yeah.
And it's all about, so in the book we have this character called Richie Raccoon, who's like this rich character, and he had nice clothes, and he had loads and loads of gold, and everyone wants to be like him. But soon enough he spent all his gold and he couldn't find any more, and so he was in dire straits. And so he went and sort of met this character called Grandpa, which is the main character in my book, Grandpa's Fortune Fables, who'd grown this whole forest, and he was enjoying life. He had all these fruits from his forest. And yeah, everyone was like quite envious of this forest that he'd grown. So Grandpa said to him, okay, you can go, I'll give you some seeds and you can go and grow your own forest. So Richie Raccoon was like, fantastic. And so he got some seeds, and Grandpa said, go to the other side of this island and you can plant them over there. But every time he had to go to the other side of this island, he had to go through this village. And it was the village that he used to go to all the time when he had loads of gold to buy everything that he would ever want. But he hadn't been there for a while. So the first time he walks into this village and he meets his friend, who's Bill, who works at the bakery. And he's like so excited to see him and say, oh, come and have a bit of your favorite carrot cake. I haven't seen you for a long time. But Richie was like, no, I don't have any money. And he's like, I've only got these seeds and I want to go and plant and grow my own forest. And Bill was like, it's okay, we're good friends. Just give me 2 of your seeds and then we can catch up. You'll still have plenty of seeds left. And yeah, you can still grow your forest. And so Richie thought about it and said, yep, I'll still have some seeds left. It's only 2. And that's what he did. So he gives over his seeds and has his cake. And he feels good about himself. Then he walks through the village and again to go and plant his seeds. But just as he's leaving, he meets this his old friend Tina, who makes all the clothes. So she's like a tailor. And so again, Richie tells that he's going to go and grow this forest. And Tina's like, you cannot go and go digging and planting seeds wearing that nice suit that I made you. And so Richie was still wearing one of the nice suits he was wearing from when he had all this gold. And she said, look, give me your 8 seeds that you've got left, and I'll make you an outfit that means that you can go gardening, digging, etc. And if you get any dirt on it, it'll be fine. Because if you get any dirt on your nice suit, it's going to be ruined and you're just going to cost you more money in the future. So Richie thinks about it and says, oh, if I do get this suit dirty, it's going to cost me more in the future. And I can always earn some more seeds from Grandpa tomorrow. So he hands over his 8 seeds, gets his nice gardening outfit. Next day, he goes back to Grandpa, says, look, I'm now ready to go and plant my seeds. Can I have some more seeds? So Grandpa gives him some more seeds. And again, on his way to go and start his forest. But he goes through the village again. And as he gets through the village, he meets his friend Derek. And his friend Derek says, oh, it's so good to see you, Richie. I know how much you love your sunglasses and how everyone knows you lose them so often. But today there's a 2-for-1 sale on these sunglasses. So they're only 10. You can probably give away your 10 seeds and get 2 pairs. It's going to save you some money in the future because you won't have to buy 2 in the future. And again, Richie thinks about it, and he thinks about how he can always earn some more seeds tomorrow, and he'll be saving himself some money in the future. So again, he hands over the 10 seeds, gets his sunglasses. Then the next day he goes back to Grandpa and says, oh, I need some more seeds. I've saved some money in the future by my suit and my sunglasses. And Grandpa says to him, look, every time you go into the village, someone's going to convince you to give them your seeds because they're going to save you some money in the future. And you're always going to think that you can always earn some more money tomorrow. But if you keep thinking like that and keep going to the village, you're never going to grow your forest. So you need to get into the habit of making sure that you go around the village, plant your seeds. Then if you've got some seeds left, then go into the village. Never go into the village with all your seeds because you'll never have any when you come out. And soon enough, that's what Richie does. He goes around the village, plants his seeds, and then goes to see his friends. And then after not long, his forest starts to grow and he has some extra seeds that are falling from the trees. And then he can go back and start buying the things that he had before. And then there's a lot more adventures that Richie goes on before he has his full adventure. But the power of that story, and when I told my children when I first wrote it, was that they were like, could tell what was going to happen before. And they were like, no, don't give your seeds away.
Sure. The older they get, the more they'll see it with the temptations that we all have on a daily basis, whether it's social media or in the supermarket, 2-for-1 this, or there's always going to be something to buy that's not needed.
Exactly. And so we say to my children now, every time they get some money, just make sure you go around the village, plant some of those seeds, and
First. Yeah.
then go into it. So, and it's all about that habit. So every parent listening to this, one of the most powerful things you can do to help your children become financially healthy when they're growing up is get them into the habit of saving a little bit of money every single time they get some, even if that amount of money is really small. So even if they get £1, get them to save that 10p. I know 10p might be so small, it doesn't make any difference, but it's the habit rather than the amount. And as they get older, it'll be just what they do. And then they'll start to see that money getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they get more excited about it and want to continue to add to it. But with so many people today, spend more than they earn because they're in the habit of spending, and we need to get them into the habit of saving just a little bit. It doesn't need to be much. They can still spend lots, but just that little bit. And that's a secret power that I hope kids form.
And this probably leads on to, you talk about pocket money a lot as being a really good way. So actually instilling that habit of when you're giving your children pocket money to make sure they save some of that pocket money, presumably before then going out and spending. So could you talk to us a little bit about when you introduce pocket money and how you actually utilize that as a way of teaching your children about money?
Certainly. Yeah, no, so I very much see pocket money as the best financial education tool for children, because it's an educational tool, even though it's not teaching about like textbook lecture. It's allowing children to use money and start making money decisions from that young age. So getting them into the habit of saving that 1 out of every 10 seeds that they receive, but also it allows them to start making money decisions. And so gets them to think about, do I want to buy something now, or do I want to start saving up for a little bit? Do I even making mistakes? And again, I'm very, I feel that we all learn from mistakes, but as adults, if we learn about mistakes when we're adults, it's a lot more painful. The money's about much bigger, whereas actually for children to make money decisions is great. And pocket money allows it to make it more often. And I think that's the key. When some children only get money on special occasions, it becomes such a novelty that it's too hard to then instill good behaviors, because if they only get certain money on, let's say, Tooth Fairy or their birthdays, whereas if they get a bit of money frequently, they can start making those decisions, learning from it, trying something different, and then it can be reinforced and reinforced.
Preparing them for a paycheck and
yeah, exactly. And the other bit is it allows to sort of transfer responsibilities from the parents to the kids over time. So if you think about the framework of when children are very, very young, they have no financial responsibilities because they're too young. Then you've got 18-year-olds, and by the time they're 18, you kind of want them to be making most of the spending decisions themselves about what to eat, where clothes they wear, where they go to entertainment, and start thinking about bills, etc., to pay. And so you kind of want to use pocket money as a way of transferring that responsibility from the child to the 18-year-old slowly over time. And this really helps in terms of how much pocket money should you give children. And it's more of a framework. So every family is going to be slightly different in terms of how much money they have to give for pocket money, or how much they want to give for pocket money. But the framework that we use is for my daughters, for example, we give them a little bit of pocket money, but we say to them, we're only going to buy toys on your birthday and Christmas, but we're not going to buy any toys for you throughout the year, but we're going to give you a little bit of pocket money. So you have to buy your own toys. And so they then get to choose if they want lots of little toys weekly, or they want to save up for something bigger. But it gives them a sense of responsibility. And then as they get older, we'll give them a little bit more pocket money, but then we'll also give them some responsibility. So it might be casual clothes, for example. We'll say, well, we'll give you a bit more extra pocket money, but we're not going to buy you t-shirts and shorts and whatever it may be. You have to decide. So then they can choose whether they want lots of cheap t-shirts, or they want to save up for a sports t-shirt or a team maybe, or whatever it may be. And they can get to make those choices and make those mistakes along the way. And at some point, we'll kind of increase the responsibility. At some point, when when they're sort of in their early teenagers, we'll say, right, we're going to give you this extra responsibility, but we're not going to just give you the money. You have to earn the money. And then we start getting them into the concept of money's not just for free. They have to think about different ways of earning it, such that when they get to 18, again, they have gradually got to that point where they're kind of earning the money, they're looking after the money, they've made lots of mistakes, and hopefully seen some of their money grow as well over that period of time.
And it can be gradual as well. I liked the blog that you put out at the weekend, where you have sort of at different stages of a child's development, you can introduce different things. So yeah, my husband and I had differing views regarding the TV tokens. Not sure if it's going to work on the 2-year-old yet, but yeah, but it's just good that there are these types of things that can be introduced from an early age right up until teenage years, when you can start to talk about more entrepreneurial ideas of how they can grow their own money and so on. So yeah, I thought it was really great.
Thank you. Yes, but yeah, no, so if parents can afford to do so, then pocket money is, again, it's not so much about how much the pocket money is, it's more about the habits and the routine. So even small amounts can work.
Sure. Brilliant. So could you please now, well, I mean, we talk about investing, because I mean, the idea of investing can be quite daunting for many people, never mind children. And you do this very well in your book. So could you please provide, for the purpose of today's webinar, an example of when someone invests in a company, what actually happens to that money?
Yeah, no, certainly. So as I mentioned, the second rule of wealth is to invest the money and make that money grow. And so we generally talk about investing in terms of investing in the stock market and buying companies. So I wanted to teach my daughters about this. So I think we were in Hong Kong, we were sitting in a McDonald's, and my eldest daughter, who was 7 at that time, said to me, "Daddy, how do these blue trees grow? What are they?" And so I said to them, "Well, actually, I can tell you based on this McDonald's." So we said, so for my family, we put a bit of money away each month into a savings account. So this is an investment account, sorry. And that investment account invests in thousands of companies around the world. It's a global index fund or passive fund that invests in thousands of companies. And one of those happens to be McDonald's. So we invest some of that. We told them we invest some of your money each month, and that money goes to thousands of different companies. So you can kind of build that up. And one of those, so as we were in McDonald's, so I said to them, actually, we give some money each month to McDonald's. And as we're talking about it, I said to them, so this means that you own a piece of McDonald's. So I said, by investing and giving McDonald's, you own. The excitement on their face took me by surprise. They're like, "What? We own this table, we own this chair, we own this tray." I'm like, "Yeah, not just here, but all the McDonald's around the world. You own a piece of it." Granted, I didn't go through just how small the amount that they own is, but it didn't matter. They're just excited. And the key piece was saying, well, every time you give some money to McDonald's doesn't just put it in a bank account. They actually use that money to try and make that money grow. So in the case of McDonald's, they use that money to either open new restaurants or create new burgers, which allows them to make more money. And the more money, because you own a piece of McDonald's, the more money McDonald's makes, essentially the more money that you make. And that's essentially, as they make more money, you get some more of that back because you own it. And that's how your kind of blue trees grow. And they really liked that. And what happened is we then went from McDonald's, we walked around the kind of shopping mall, and we saw the Apple stores. We saw all of the people buying their iPads and iPhones. And I was like, yep, you own a piece of Apple as well. So all those people who are buying some of the products, some of that money is yours because you own it. And in Hong Kong, there's a Disneyland, and we were on a boat on the way home, and we could see Disneyland. And I was like, yep, you own a piece of Disney. And that got them super excited. I was like, so every time someone watches a movie at the theater or buys, at the time, DVDs, you own a bit of that money. And so they got really excited about this concept of, by giving some money to these companies, like investing in them, they own it. And therefore, as those companies grow, then they get these trees that I've talked about. They understand, these trees are these companies that are growing. So in their minds, they've got these McDonald's trees and Apple trees and all these thousands
making it real and tangible for them. So yeah,
exactly. And it's just from a very young age, showing them the kind of flow of money, which is essentially saying where people spend money, that money goes to companies. Those companies are owned by people, and those people are the investors. So when people spend, that money is just kind of flowing to the investors. And I want my children to be at that end of that funnel where the money is kind of coming down to grow.
Okay.
So yeah, so from the youngest age, I wanted them to understand that whilst investing, when as adults, we know that investing can seem very daunting, very scary, and we can talk about different acronyms, and the people feel that you have to be really intelligent and have all this sort of financial background to understand what investing is. But in the simple terms, it's just owning a piece of company and using everyday companies like McDonald's or Disney or Alphabet, which is Google, makes it much more easy and fun for them.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. It's really good. And what about when you were talking about investment risk then? So how would you explain that to a child so that they can understand how that works?
Yeah, this is where I think the seed and tree analogy really comes really powerful, and I'd love to. So as you say, that investing seems very scary for lots of people. They hear these headlines of the stock market tumbling, companies like Blockbuster going out of business, which is funny. When I talk to my children about companies going bust, I mentioned Blockbuster Video. I never felt so old. I had to teach them about these cassettes that we put into these machines, and they're like, "Oh my God, how did you survive?" But so we talked. Yeah. Anyway, so I sort of said to them, "There's going to be these headlines, and that's because in the short term, things can go wrong," and talked about the Blockbuster example of Netflix coming along and no one wanting to go out to to Blockbuster, and they sat at their sofas and choose which films. So Blockbuster went out of business. But a tree analogy really helps, because I said to say to my daughters, when you grow a forest, sometimes there's going to be a storm, and in a storm, some trees and branches get broken. And so sometimes one of those trees could be the Blockbuster trees, and that gets completely destroyed. But as long as you've got a whole forest of lots of different types of trees, generally most forests survive. And in fact, after a storm, most forests grow back bigger and stronger than ever before. And just having this mindset and helping children to see that stock markets do go up and down, but over time, if you let the storm pass, you'll grow back. And it was nice for my daughters, because we've been investing, and then we had the coronavirus started, and then the stock market plummeted. So we used the McDonald's example, saying, well, everyone's stuck at home, they can't go out and buy their burgers, and therefore the stock market for McDonald's goes down. But as soon as the sort of vaccines coming around, people go out and buy the burgers and open new stores. And so that was a nice story. That kind of just worked out really nicely in terms of what happened in reality versus because clearly sometimes the storms are less obvious of why they've happened and when they're going to recover. But we just know from history that over 100, nearly 120, 30 years of the stock market and being around, there's been so many storms, and every time it's got back bigger and stronger. And that's kind of mindset. So I'm always hoping for my children that we invest for them, but we show them what's going on, such that when they become adults and they're 18 and there's another stock market crash, they'll be like, it's fine, we've seen this many times before.
Which is amazing, because very few kids, teenagers would even have thought about the stock market, never mind investing it at that age. So yeah, and it's good to bring it back again to that analogy and making it visual and real for them.
Yeah, no, and I think that's been one of the bits that I think when parents have been reading my blogs to help their kids, they've actually said, actually, I never knew about the stock market. I thought it was really scary. And they've actually started to open accounts, not just for their kids, but for themselves. And that's been one of the most rewarding, is to hear that families are doing this together,
making action,
and using their children as a catalyst to make their own financial futures better. So yeah, no, it seems to work very well on all ages.
That's brilliant. And have you got any tips to share with us? You said the last rule of wealth is about being patient. So what tips can you share with us in terms of how to instill that in our children?
Yeah, no, certainly. So just before I go into the tips, for some people who might not have heard, there's a really good experiment called the Stanford Marshmallow Experiment. And so it was in the mid 1970s. And so what they did is they got young children in a room individually, and gave them, put one marshmallow in front of them, but then they also put 2 marshmallows to the side. And they said, you can sit here and you can eat that 1 marshmallow, or you can wait 15 minutes and then you get the 2 marshmallows. So they gave them the choice and then left them in the room alone with the marshmallows, and then to see who ate the 1 marshmallow and who waited for the 2. Then they tracked the lives of these children over time. And there was a strong correlation, not just in terms of money, but in terms of relationships, school, careers, that the children that waited 15 minutes and got 2 marshmallows had kind of significantly better outcomes. And so it was all about that sort of delayed gratification. And so it's such an important skill, and especially in today's world where there's so much pressure to spend, and it's so easy to spend. So you look at Amazon, for example, where you kind of look at Amazon and you've spent some money just by hovering your cursor over something. It's so easy. So we need to train kids to be patient. But when it comes to training, there's 2 bits. One is to try and keep it small. And I think it's not a case of you can't have this, you just have to wait. Which is really, really hard. So if you think about, I use the example for myself about chocolate. If someone said to me, here's a chocolate bar, but you're not allowed to eat it, I would fail miserably and I'd get very grumpy. But if someone said to me, you can eat most of it, just keep a small bit for tomorrow or whenever it may be, then, oh, that's much, much easier to do. And I think that's what, when it comes to patience, it doesn't mean it's all or nothing. It's about trying to be patient with a little bit. So whether that's TV time, whether that's chocolate or snacks, or whether that's particularly money. So again, it goes to that first rule of
what's relevant to them. Yeah,
exactly. And just trying to reinforce that and trying to keep it small and show that just try and be patient a little bit, not all of it, because I think it's too hard if we do that. The second piece is when children do save that little bit, whether it's again a snack or money, try and reward them for that. Show them that there's a reward for being patient. And so clearly when children are younger, we can't wait years to say, well, if you save this now and in years. So if your children do save a little bit, give them a little, I don't know, just even a few pence or cents to top up, to say, well done on saving, here's a little bit extra. Or say, potentially say to them, look, if you save up for, I don't know, whether it may be a bike or a certain toy, if you get to 90% of the way, I'll give you the last 10% as a reward for doing that savings, if they're going to build up over a period of time. Because in life, patience is hugely rewarded, but it's over many, many years. And so we need to just show them it is rewarded, but over slightly shorter periods. And then as they get older, you can kind of extend those periods. Because if they don't understand that patience is rewarded, and this is why so many adults today are not patient, because they've never tried and therefore never seen the reward. So if you put some money into the bank in a savings account, you don't see much reward in the short term. And therefore most people give up. And so what we need to do is show that it is rewarded. And therefore, so the more and more we can do to help kids learn about patience and going through these little exercises. And you potentially have 2 siblings who one is naturally patient and the other isn't. And it's not to say that just because naturally they're less patient, they're not going to be good with money. They can be taught and trained. It just takes a bit more patience from the parents to go through that process.
And how do you find the gap between yours in terms of their development of understanding money, and how do you find that, managing that, given the fact that they might be at different stages?
Yeah, so certainly my youngest, so they're 2 years apart. My youngest is definitely much more of a natural saver, but yet my eldest, I think less her own devices would be a spender, but because I've spent so much time telling the stories and analogies, etc., they've both got into some really positive habits from the youngest age to do that. But I even looking at myself and my sister, I think I was naturally a bit more of a saver than my sister over time. But again, I don't think there's a gender rationale for that, but I think there's just different siblings have different tendencies.
For sure,
and it's just trying to help them see that especially if one is a saver, to sort of highlight to the other the sort of the rewards and benefits of doing that without it seeming like a punishment for not doing it, but more of an incentive to be patient.
Okay, excellent. So I'll just summarize now. So obviously you talked about the 3 rules of wealth. First of all, spending less than you earn. investing what you save, and the last but not least, to be patient, because that is the key really to successful investing, certainly over the long term. You've also talked about how pocket money how pocket money can be utilised as a really effective way of teaching children about money. Is there anything you would like to add to that, Will?
No, I think that's the key. And there's so many different money topics we can teach children about. And if we had time, we could speak for hours and hours on the different topics. But I do strongly believe that if children follow these actions when it comes to money, then yeah, they're going to grow up financially healthy and wealthy. And I'm going to estimate around 95% of people today are not following these 3 rules. So by helping them develop them from the young age, I think it's going to give them such an advantage in life, and hopefully give them sort of more self-confidence, higher self-esteem, and yeah, look after that money, and not just for themselves, but for their family as well.
Brilliant. So thank you so much, Will, for joining today. You've shared some really useful tips and nuggets of information, which I'm sure are going to help a lot of parents watching this to begin to engage with the children on this topic. I think really the best way to learn anything in life is through stories, and your book is an excellent resource for this, as are the regular blogs that you put out. So for anyone that would like to learn more, where can they find you, and where can they find your book?
Yeah, certainly. So yeah, my website is bluetreesavings.com. So on there, I have a number of different resources. So yeah, weekly I release a new blog to help parents teach kids about a different money topic, sometimes going through the 3 rules of wealth, but some going into tax and debt and the 2008 financial crisis, but in a way in which children can understand and learn, but also the parents. But on there, you'll find all the details about my book, Grandpa's Fortune Fables. You can even download the first 2 chapters to have a read of that. But yeah, the book's available on Amazon in audio or ebook or paperback, or even hardback if you want a special version of that. But yeah, no, it's on my website, and there I've got lots of tips to help any parents of any level or any kind of financial background. Brilliant.
Thanks again, Will, and thank you to those for joining today's webinar. I really hope you found it useful, and I would certainly recommend that you go out and buy Will's book and subscribe to his website. If anyone has any questions or would like to understand how to get started, whether that is saving for their children or even for themselves, then I would be more than happy to sit down with you on an individual basis to discuss further. I think one of the areas in particular when it comes to financial planning, which is of importance to parents, is education fee planning. Following Brexit, there have been a number of changes in relation to tuition fees, and most recently actually tuition loans, which could impact and mean that for many British families that are living outside of the UK, that are planning to send their children to a UK university, they may end up having to pay significantly more than they would have had to have done previously. So again, well, from a financial planning perspective, obviously this is really important, because it means that you need to be starting to think about these things sooner rather than later. Happy to speak to anyone again on an individual basis if you'd like to learn more in this area. So thanks again, everyone, and goodbye.